Libertarians are going to be most affected, I think. They're going to be very, very upset that this happened and that, the sky didn't fall. It didn't expand into a wider war. It was just a strike. And Iran was like, well, we're not really in a position to do anything about this, are we? And took the actual, self-preservation route.
Why are they mad? Because they wanted to see this disintegrate?
Well, because they were all predicting that there was going to be a massive, upheaval in the Middle East. It'll turn into a broader war. It'll turn into World War III, blah, blah, blah. But you look around and it speaks to actually the realistic conditions of the international rivals the U.S. has. Russia doesn't have the ability to take on the U.S. They can't take on the Ukraine, right? Like they can't handle Ukraine. They're not going to be able to take on the U.S. So they're not going to really step in to help Iran. Same thing with China. China has a significant incentive to keep the status quo, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz, because they get half their oil or whatever. They get tons of business there. Barrels, so China was just like, no, you're not shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. They had no friends at all, and no one was there to support them. So I think that speaks to this
I'm
situation.
stoked for peace.
Yeah.
There's peace.
Yeah.
I do leave it to Trump to start already branding a war. Like he's already naming
12 days
it.
war, yeah.
There's a lot in this message.
It wasn't a war, and a ceasefire doesn't mean a peace agreement. Sometimes when you're in a war, you'll call a ceasefire for a short period, and then you'll go back to fighting. So it doesn't mean, but there never was a war to call a peace agreement for anyway. They fired, 13 or 14 missiles into Qatar, and all but one of them were shot down. One of the missiles was errant, so they just let it go.
Yeah, they're like, where's it going?
I personally don't trust anything coming out of this administration at the moment. They just sneak attacked Iran. I imagine they're going to do it again. But like you said, their faces on the ground, they're being stomped on, their bones are breaking. They have no choice but to.
How many people live in Iran, Ian?
What's that?
How many people live in
I
Iran?
believe there's 92 million, but I haven't done the research. I haven't done the research.
I respect what you are saying, Ian. The Trump administration, this is where I'm cautious. They have made a lot of comments about negotiating peace, negotiating in good faith, while they were actually orchestrating a sneak attack on Iran. Now, if it weren't for the subsequent reporting from numerous individuals involved that there was a ceasefire, initially I was skeptical. It's like, I don't believe it. Trump announces they got a ceasefire, and then if Iran keeps attacking, it's Iran that becomes the aggressor. However, it does look like Trump is trying to avoid escalation in the region and just wanted to take out as much of their nuclear enrichment as possible. I don't know that they did. Like, if you want to argue efficacy, there's a lot of people saying 900 pounds of uranium is missing. What did they actually do? It's like, well, they did what they could in terms of that agenda item. The argument here is that Trump has, under the War Powers Act, it's an old bill, if there's an imminent threat, he can order a military strike. Within 60 days, he must stop and ask Congress for approval to continue. If this does end, Trump, he did it. I will say this to everybody because they were like, Tim, you were saying that it was going to escalate. I have no problem being wrong. I'm not going to sit here and be like, here's why Trump is actually going to screw up. No, I'm stoked. Holy crap, I'd love to be wrong. I was worried AF that this was going to escalate. If Trump really did just pull it off, I apologize for doubting the man.
I know that parents, mothers in particular, are thrilled that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. So, moms, for the most part, I would say probably don't understand Middle East policy and what's going on over there, but they have concerns as parents. And one of those things is a nuclear Iran. That's a very big possibility. And so I didn't hear a lot of pushback from the mom community when we went in and took out those nuclear facilities.
What concerns me, though, is the idea here, Lend-Lease, the Lend-Lease program. With the Americans were giving the British weapons before World War II, but they couldn't sell them because they would have been violating, some shit. So they were like
the Lend-Lease with the Soviets.
The Lend-Lease was a program between the Americans and the British where the Americans were giving they were giving it to a lot of people, but the British particularly, they're giving them weapons. And then they were like, you just pay us back later. So someone could give the Iranians a nuclear weapon and be like, just pay us later. Like, they don't have to make it. They can get one. They can receive one also. So we need to strengthen our diplomatic ties with the Chinese, the Russians, and the Indians right now, particularly because they don't want a nuclear Iran. Nobody wants it. I don't think, except for these mullahs.
If nobody wants a nuclear Iran, who's going to give them the nuclear bomb?
I know. Maybe because Putin won't always be in power, and if some crazy guy gets it after Putin,
old president of Russia, I think, said he was going to help them, and that happened.
Or that other countries were rushing in.
Yeah.
North Korea, of course, but he's also on good terms with Trump. So I think that I was going to say regime change. How can I say this smoothly?
Authoritarian.
I don't like
a
theocracy. I find theocracy even more dangerous than monarchy.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.